Sabe quem encontrou em Londres? Sabe Good morning. Morning. Officially. Okay, so the text we're going to read today is a text psychographed by Divaldo, and it's by Joana de Angelis, and it was actually very recent. It was psychographed in February of 2023, so it's a very recent one. And it's called Most Holy Mother. And Joana says, born in Nazareth, Mary was destined to renew the world through her purity and love. Becoming the mother of Jesus, she ennobled this role with uncommon sacrifice and self-denial. Subject to the prevailing customs that made women servants of men, she conducted herself with such dignity that she exalted femininity and restored it to its rightful place. Her son came to bring light to the darkness of humanity, so that habits and customs might be transformed for the better. During his life of labor with his father, she offered him unparalleled affection and devotion, although she had not a clear idea of the messianic mission he was destined to fulfill. When she began to understand it, her loving care followed his luminous footsteps until the tragic afternoon before the cross of impiety and the madness of the human crowd that demanded his life upon the infamous wood. Seeing him at that moment in his final agony, without a friend, amid the turmoil that engulfed Calgary, she sought to overcome her anguish and pain in order to ask, in piercing sorrow, my son. It's hard. What have men done to you? And he, with difficulty, in the extreme and final moments of his bodily existence, answered while looking at John the Apostle, the beloved disciple who accompanied her. Woman, he did not call her mother, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. Nature itself was dominated by the terror that seized those perverse witnesses of the martyr. He was offering her to humanity, and humanity would henceforth become her family. From the august moment onward, all the men and women of the world became her children, and she became the most holy mother of all. Today, when your own Calvary seems to be tormenting you and despair tries to take hold of your feelings, remember Mary, the most holy mother, and continue onward with joy and confidence under her protection. For today's prayer, I am going to apologize to my English-speaking friends. You are okay with Portuguese, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I have the translation here, but I'm gonna read a prayer in the form of a poem from Chico Xavier's very first book. Are there any more English speakers? No? You got yours?
Give it to me.
Yes? Of course. I have two. There's two there. So I'm gonna read it in Portuguese, and I apologize. I prefer to keep the text like close to the original as opposed to make it rhyme. So in Portuguese, it's gonna sound beautiful and rhyme, but in English, it's the faithful as possible of a translation. Okay? So I invite everybody, if you're not reading in English, to close your eyes and try to feel the words. Ave Maria. Ave Maria, Senhora do amor que ampara e redime. Ai do mundo, se não for a vossa missão sublime. Cheia de graça e bondade, é por vós que conhecemos a eterna revelação da vida em seus dons supremos. O Senhor sempre é convosco, mensageira da ternura, providência dos que choram nas sombras da desventura. Bendita sois vós, Rainha, estrela da humanidade, rosa mística da fé, lírio puro da humildade. Entre as mulheres sois vós, a mãe das mães desvalidas, nossa porta de esperança e anjo de nossas vidas. Bendito o fruto imortal da vossa missão de luz, desde a paz da manjedoura às dores além da cruz. Assim seja para sempre, ó divina soberana, refúgio dos que padecem nas dores da luta humana. Ave Maria, Senhora do amor que ampara e redime, ai do mundo, se não fosse a vossa missão sublime. And we'll close our eyes, and with this wonderful poem, we will thank God our Father, who sent us the sublime Spirit to be the mother of our messenger, to be the mother of our master. We thank our master for choosing Mary as the highest example of maternal love. We thank the spiritual guides of our house, and we ask that today our humble talk is able to at least glimpse at the greatness of the Spirit of Mary of Nazareth, our most holy mother. So, oh yeah, I love it every time I close my eyes. When I open, there's nothing. Okay. Ah yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, in past years, I've spoken quite a bit about maternal love, unconditional love, what Spiritism says about motherhood and all of that. But this year I was very inspired by a dear friend who is here, and hopefully I won't steal his thunder when he chooses to talk about Mary. But thank you for the inspiration.
Very welcome.
So today we're going to talk about Mary, Mother of us all, the maternal love that embraces every soul. So the idea here is I feel that sometimes some of us Spiritists don't quite understand the greatness of that Spirit. Mainly if we come from other religions, traditions, where She's just the mother of Jesus. She was just there. But if we look at her with Spiritist lenses, which Spiritists usually don't do either, we will see the greatness of this Spirit. So we're going to go a little bit through the Bible, history, tradition, hidden Gospels. Then we're going to go through what Spiritism says about Mary. And then we'll finally get to a message. And hopefully at the end, this image will mean more to us. And of course, as everybody knows, I love to start with questions. I love questions. So for us to reflect with ourselves, we don't need to say it out loud. But for us individually, who is Mary of Nazareth? How much time have we spent ever thinking about her? What do I know about her? How much do I know about Mary? And what do I think about her? Because it's different. Knowing is different from our opinion. So what's my opinion of Mary? And right now, I really want us to concentrate in the last one. Take 10 seconds, close your eyes and think. What sentiment comes to my mind or my heart when I think about Mary? And we'll go back to this question at the end and see if we feel any difference in how we feel about her after, hopefully, learning something, either from the history side or from spiritual side. Sounds good? Let's embark on the journey?
Yes.
All right. So let's start with, of course, the gospel. What does the gospel say about Mary? Is Mary even in the gospel? Because we have 4 gospels, right? So we have...
I don't know. Tell me more.
We have the gospel of Matthew,
Oh, yeah.
John,
Mark.
Mark, and Luke. There we go. Out of the 4 gospels, 3 of them are called synoptic gospels because they are...
The same.
They might look the same, but they are geared towards different audiences, let's say. But out of the 4, which ones are the ones that really look alike?
Matthew, Luke, and Mark.
Yes, Matthew, Luke, and Mark. John's gospel is the one that is different from, more different from the 3. But there are some things that are in all 4. Because the gospels are basically telling the story of Jesus. And there's one of the gospels that actually spends quite a bit of time on Mary.
John.
Luke.
Luke. And why? Because, like, Luke didn't even meet Jesus. I'll tell you why. In the book, Paul and Stephen, there's a passage in the book where actually Paul takes Luke to see Mary, to visit Mary. And Paul tells Luke, later you come back and you interview her for your records. So this is why Luke has more information about Mary, because he actually went back and interviewed her. And therefore, he wrote more about her. Okay, there we already, at least some of us, learned something. Now, something interesting. Other than Luke, the other Gospels barely mention her. By name, very few times, a few more times as the mother of Jesus, but not the name Mary. Funny enough, the Quran has an entire chapter dedicated to Mary. The Quran mentions Mary 35 times, but it mentions Jesus only 19. This I learned from watching hours and hours of other talks, by the way. So I gathered all the information here. So again, the gospel that talks more is the Gospel of Luke, because Paul told him to go back and get her side of the story. And Luke did. So the Gospel of Luke starts in the first chapter talking about John the Baptist's birth announcement to Zacharias. Okay, who is who? Zacharias was married to Elizabeth, in Portuguese, Isabel, Mary's cousin. And they were both a little bit older in years. They consider themselves old, but for us, I imagine they were like in their 30s. Because at that time, they started having kids when they were pretty much teenagers. At least the girls started having kids at like 14, 15. So 30 was considered old for the time. But there's no record of numbers. This is just a guess based on historical facts, okay? So Gabriel, the angel, first comes to Zechariah to announce that John the Baptist was going to be born. So he announces to Zechariah, and he says, your wife's going to get pregnant, and you're going to name the baby John, which was already a problem. Because at that time, you were supposed to name the firstborn son as same as the grandfather, or worst case scenario, same as the father. But like, there was nobody in his family called John. So, let's keep going. 6 months later, when Elizabeth, or Isabel in Portuguese, was pregnant with John the Baptist, she was 6 months pregnant, Gabriel decided to pay a visit to Mary, who at the time, the records differ a little, and it could be an issue of translation. Some records say that she was engaged or betrothed to Joseph. Some records say that she was already married. So we don't know. Something got lost in translation. And it's funny because when Gabriel came to Zechariah, he first said, because Zechariah panicked. And he's like, what the heck's going on? Like, he sees like a spirit, and it was in the temple, and he was like, this is not supposed to be happening. So he panicked, and Gabriel started the conversation by saying, don't be afraid, calm down. Then he delivered his message and left. 6 months later, when Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant, Gabriel comes to Mary. And when he shows up to Mary, he doesn't greet her by saying, don't be afraid, because Mary was not afraid. Mary looked at Gabriel, and Gabriel greeted her saying, Hail, Ave, Salve. It's a salute to someone high. Hail, highly favored one. The Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. Does that sound familiar?
Hail Mary.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed are you among women. Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco. Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres. So, funny, it came from the Bible. If we didn't know where Hail Mary came from. And at this point, Mary was a little bothered because she was like, what kind of greeting is this? Like, why is he talking to me like this? And at that point, then Gabriel said, don't be afraid, it's okay. And then Gabriel delivers the message that she was gonna give birth to a child. And while Zechariah was like, my wife is old, she can't get pregnant. So Zechariah immediately doubted Gabriel. Mary was like, how is that going to happen? By her answer, it hints to me at the fact that she was only engaged. Because she says, how's that going to happen if I don't know any man? So she didn't doubt. She was just trying to figure out how that was going to happen. And then Gabriel said, don't be afraid. For God, nothing is impossible. We got you. You're fine. Now, as we said, and as Jola de Angelis said in the beginning of the text, for us right now, yeah, great. But let's think about the time when women were properties. At first, they were properties of their families, and they went from being under their families to being under their husbands. And a woman who didn't have a child had no respect, because the role of the woman was to have a child. So if you can't even do that, what are you good for? And a woman who got pregnant before getting married, way worse than not having one. Right? She could even be stoned to death depending on the situation. With this extremely heavy burden on a girl, some records say 13, 14, some records say between 16 and 17. So, and she didn't have her parents. So she had nobody to defend her against society. With all this extremely heavy burden, what does Mary say?
Yes.
Yeah, she says, sorry, no can do. This is Mary. And she says, behold the maid servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. Eis aqui a serva do Senhor, que se faça em mim a vontade do Pai. How brave did she have to be? Or how much faith did she have in God? Do we think we would be able to do the same thing in her stead at that time? Same conditions, same everything. Do we feel like we would be prepared? As a woman, I think for the men it's a little harder to picture, but as a woman, I would run. I would pull a page from Peter's book and disappear. Now, another thing that I think it's really important, like little hints that history gives us for us to understand her greatness. The birth of John the Baptist, who was the one who preceded Jesus. He came to announce Jesus. Like John was a really important character in our story here, or history. His birth was announced to Zacharias, his father. Jesus' birth was announced to Joseph. Later, after announcing to Mary, Gabriel went to Joseph and said, buddy, don't say anything. Don't kiss her out. Hang tight. Stay strong. This is how it's meant to be. And amongst Spiritists, I've seen countless people going on and on and on and on about the discussion. If Mary was a virgin, if she wasn't, and all that. Again, it could be a matter of translation. Because the word used in Hebrew is the same word for virgin, biologically virgin, somebody who never had sexual relationships, but it's the same for young girl and beautiful girl. None of the superior spirits in any trustworthy Spiritist books has ever wanted to touch on the subject. And the main question is, what difference does it make? None. Right? Simon Pedro, the speaker, he says something that I found it was awesome. He was like, Mary's sexual life is her own business. Why do we want to stick our nose where it doesn't belong? We like our privacy. Give Mary hers. Right? So how it happened doesn't change anything. Our role is not to figure that out, it's to follow her as a model as well as Jesus. Right? We get distracted with these little details. We get distracted with the little things and we forget about the big picture. So, moving on, then Jesus was born, and on the 8th day he was circumcised, and Luke keeps going on with the story. Then, when he was a few days old, according to Jewish tradition, Mary and Joseph took Jesus to Jerusalem for all the rituals. He was the oldest child and he was a male, so there were animal sacrifices that need to be done. There were rituals that needed to be in place according to their religion and tradition. And when they are leaving the temple with Jesus, they meet a very wise old Jewish man, very well respected, called Simeon. And Simeon says that now he can die at peace because he has seen the salvation of the world. So they were prophetic words. And after all that, Mary was as happy as can be until Simeon looks at Mary and says, but a sword will pierce through your soul. More prophetic words. So, again, like the text said, at the time, Mary knew Jesus wasn't a regular child because of Gabriel, because of all of that, but she had no idea how big that thing was. She had no idea the dimension of the mission, right? So, a lot of records say that Mary had an amazing memory, so she kept that in mind. She put it in a little box for the future, that a sword would pierce her soul. They returned to Nazareth, and every parent, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover, to celebrate Passover with the Jewish people. One time they went when Jesus was about 12. And at that age, he was to be introduced at the temple, and there were more rites, and so on and so forth. And for whatever reason, when it was time to go back to Nazareth, it was like a big caravan. It was a huge group of people going. So for some reason, Mary thought Jesus was with Joseph, because after being presented to the temple, he wasn't supposed to hang out with the women anymore. He was supposed to hang out with the men now. Now he wasn't a child anymore. At 12, he wasn't a child anymore. So he was supposed to hang out with the men. For some reason that year, he was not officially introduced to the temple. But Mary still thought he was with Joseph. But because he wasn't officially introduced to the temple, Joseph thought Jesus was with Mary. After one day traveling,
Where's the key?
they finally look at each other and was like, isn't Jesus with you? No. Isn't he with you? No. Let's go back to Jerusalem. So Mary and Joseph go back. They looked for Jesus for 3 days until they finally found Jesus. I can't say that in English. No Sinedrio. Sanhedrin. In the Sanhedrin.
What is it?
It's like the biggest
temple.
Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Like where the biggest authorities in the law of God speak. And there was Jesus, sitting with all the teachers of the biggest temple in Jerusalem, having deep conversations. And he was asking and he was answering and they were asking. And Mary and Joseph looked at that and they're like, what? So Mary comes to Jesus and she's like, Jesus, how can you do that to your parents? We were very worried about you. We were looking for you. As cool as a cucumber, as if nothing had happened, Jesus looks at her and says, why did you seek me? Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? So like he was starting to take care of his father's business, not Joseph, because he also helped take care of the carpentry. But he was talking about God. He was like, don't you know? Why were you looking for me? I'm busy here. And you know, these are the hints that Mary was getting of how big this thing was going to become. Well, they go back to Nazareth. Time goes by. Jesus is growing up. There are some pretty funny records that talk about Jesus bringing all kinds of people to Joseph's shop, carpentry shop. Like poor people, criminals. Once he took a couple criminals inside the house, made Mary invite them in, fed them, took care of the sores in their feet and everything, and advised them. And Mary saw him changing a lot of those people that he would advise on the street, in his father's shop, at home. And that was, it was starting to click for Mary. And then we finally get to the point, there's more, but we don't have time. So I advise everybody to seriously go on YouTube. There are so many talks. Haroldo Dutra Dias, Simão Pedro, Arthur Valadares, Jorge Larra, there are so many. And so skip time, and we are now at the Jesus had already gathered a few disciples. And he was with Mary, and they are invited to the wedding in Cana, as bodas de Canaã, as we know in Portuguese. So he and the disciples are invited, and the weddings used to last days and days there. So on the third day, they ran out of wine. So Mary comes to Jesus, and she looks at him and she's like, they have no wine. Jesus looks at her and says, woman, and that's something else that was in the text by Givaldo. Woman, for us nowadays, sounds disrespectful. At the time, it wasn't. It was something like my lady, ma'am. It was a respectful title at the time. So it's like my lady. So she says, they have no wine. Jesus looks at her and he's like, woman, my lady, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. So he wasn't ready to start showing everybody what he could do. He hadn't gathered all his disciples. He had just a few. Like he was in the process. But Mary at that point knew what he was capable of. So she looks at him and is like, they have no wine. And he's like, and he says to her, like, my hour has not come. That's not my problem. What does Mary do? She calls the servants in the wedding, look at them and say, whatever he says to you, do it. And what does Jesus do? The celestial governor of a whole planetary system, who helped create our planet. He had just told her, it's not my business, it's not my time. Mary says, you do it. And what does Jesus do?
He doesn't.
He does it.
So even Jesus obeys the mom. The mom will have a problem with the kids.
You're reading my mind! You're reading my mind. Even Jesus obeyed his mother, guys.
Between God and mom, he goes with mom that time. And then you see
You do
your
that,
kids. You see your kids just.
I tried not to look at him.
You don't need to.
Because actually it's not just for us as parents to expect that for our children, but it's for us as children. Not all of us here are parents, but we all have parents.
Yeah.
And when we talk about Jesus being our model and guide, Jesus not just speaking, but actually doing it. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk, including respecting his mother and father. Because when mom says it, you do it. And something else that we
Look down it.
something else that we I think it's another hint at Mary's greatness. Some of you were here watching Givaldo's movie, and we have talked about this at different points in time. What matters is not necessarily what you say, how you say, how loud you speak, how correct your words are. What matters is the moral authority of the person who is speaking. And for Jesus to obey his mother, she was not a simple spirit. She was a very elevated spirit. So far, so good? Yeah? All right. And then comes the moment where the sword actually pierced her heart. When all the disciples scattered, and let's give credit to some of them, because some of them were actually trying to figure out a way to get Jesus out of it. Mm-hmm. They were afraid, yes, but some of them were trying to find a solution, were trying to avoid the worst. However, by the time Jesus got to the top of the Golgotha, or Skull Hill, and was put on the cross, they were still nowhere to be seen, except for John. Mary was there all the time. When Mary found out Jesus had been arrested, she actually ran to the prison and she begged the centurion, saying, "My son is in there. Can I please just see him for a moment?" The centurion pushed her. She fell, hit her head on a rock, opened a gash, and she started bleeding. Mary sat in front of the prison the whole entire night while she was bleeding for the opportunity to exchange one look of 2 seconds with Jesus when he was leaving the prison. And he looked at her and he nodded, saying, "This is the time, it's now, that's the hour." And Mary didn't despair. Her heart was pierced, her heart was torn and broken, and she couldn't understand how humanity could do that to her son, who was pure and good. But she did not rebel at all. She listened to Jesus, she accepted it, she trusted Jesus, she trusted God's plan. How many of us at this point in time?
I think the other thing too is like when you think about this time and age and a widow widower, I don't know, like a widow
They
woman.
yeah, they were supposed to remarry. They're not supposed to stay a widow. And she didn't.
And like she was with that big task on her hands, like I don't know how old Jesus was when Joseph passed, but then she was a widow, she didn't remarry, and she was living, I think, like holding her heart in her sleeve because she knew he was the chosen one, and she knew something would eventually happen to
She
him.
did.
Without cell phones, walking around, like preaching everywhere, and then and waiting for something
and
to
she
happen.
followed him. She followed him on the streets while he was being massacred by the crowd. One of the times she fell down, she tried to lift him, and he stopped her. But she tried to help. For anybody, for mothers will understand better, but anybody, think of the person you hold most dear in your heart and try to picture that person in a situation Jesus was. And you are absolutely helpless to do anything. And this woman followed, and she watched everything they did to her son.
And like
And
she
she
outlived
stayed
him.
strong.
And she lived until a very old age, like after burying your son. I think that's
She was
the
one
most,
of his most faithful apostles, right? So, looking at the injustice that Jesus was going through, like she was filled with sorrow, and even though she knew that was what's gonna happen, that was supposed to happen, like she felt in her heart that everything was going according to plan, as painful as it was, she finally says, why this injustice? Why? What have men done to you, my son? Like it says in the text by Joanna. And then Jesus sees her, and Jesus sees her with John, and she's like, what have they done to you, my son? At that moment, Jesus looks at her and say, woman, and again, woman here is not disrespectful, is my lady. Behold your son, who is John. And he looks at John and says, son. He calls John his son. And he's like, son, behold your mother. So he was entrusting Mary to John to take care of her. And this was Jesus's final lesson, the lesson of universal love. It was the crown of his work, that Mary, doesn't matter if it's biological or not, was a mother to us all. For John to see Mary as a mother figure. The whole idea of love one another, right? And then, after the cross, and then at this point, Humberto de Campos, in the book Boa Nova, or Good News, he reports that Mary said again for the second time. First time was after Gabriel announced the very difficult situation she was going to be in, being pregnant with Jesus. And then the second time was when Jesus entrusted Mary to John. Mary said, may the Lord's will be done to his maidservant. She humbly accepted the job Jesus gave her and John. So again, oops, that's not a question mark, sorry, it's supposed to be an exclamation. So, mother, behold your son, and looking at John, he addressed him with a subtle nod and said, son, behold your mother. So these words are from Good News. The Gospels describe, the Gospel of John, chapter 19, describes the same thing, just The words are a bit different, but it's pretty much the same. And then, while Mary was in deep sorrow, the disciples scattered to spread the good news, which was their jobs anyway. And everybody went their own way. And a few years went on. So Mary went to Bethany, close to her family, and stayed there for a few years until one day, who shows up? John. John shows up to finally, and this is an entire chapter. The last chapter of the book is this story. So I recommend, because there's a whole lot more detail in there. So John comes to Mary and he apologizes, saying, I'm sorry it took so long, but I couldn't take you with me because I didn't have a house, an abode, somewhere for you to live. I couldn't let you live in caves like we do. But then he finally was able to convert the king of Ephesus, and they granted him a little hut, a tiny house at top of a hill overlooking the ocean. And that's where John took me. So in that place, John kept going back to the city of Ephesus because he founded churches in Ephesus, right? And in the cities around. So he kept going to the city and preaching. So he was barely at home.
Right.
Yeah, so he was barely at home. But when people found out that the mother of Jesus was available, she was at a place that they could reach her, pilgrims started going to the house all the time. And Mary would sit with them and she would talk about Jesus when he was a child, and she would tell them stories, and she would take care of their wounds, and she would advise them, and she talked about all the things that Jesus taught her, the kingdom of God, all of that. So she really relieved the hearts of those who were suffering the most. And then one day, one pilgrim came to the house and he was suffering and he was complaining. And he was like, my mother, because at this point everybody was calling her the most holy mother, Mãe Santíssima, Mãezinha Santíssima, which some Spiritists think it came from the Catholics. No, it didn't. It came from a leper, leproso ou ranceniano, who was actually cured by her. And he called her, he said, you are the most holy mother of us all. And that's when everybody started calling her house the most holy house and her the most holy mother, Santíssima Mãe, Santíssima Mãezinha. So this pilgrim is, like pouring his heart out. He's like, I'm suffering so much and life is so hard. Like, when will God help me? When will God give me rest and all this? And he's like, how can I overcome my problems? I feel abandoned. Mary looks at him and she says something that a lot of people attribute to Chico Xavier. This too shall pass. Which is a message she sent to him. Chico was going through a very hard time and he begged Emmanuel to go to Mary and get him a message. Yeah. So a while later, Emmanuel comes back and is like, I have your answer from Mary. So Chico sits down, grabs a piece of paper and a pencil, and he's like, I'm ready. And Emmanuel says, yeah, write everything down. Then Chico gets ready and Emmanuel's like, this too shall pass. Then Chico looked at him and was like, that's it? It's like, yeah, that's Mary's message for you. Everything is temporary. Everything you're living here, all these problems, you blink and they will pass. You blink and they will be gone. So that was Mary's message to Chico. It's not that Chico said that. But Mary had already said that like 2,000 years before to that pilgrim. And then years went by and years passed. And one day, Mary got notice that they started persecuting the Christians. At that time, they were already called Christians. So Mary got word that the Romans and other people were persecuting the Christians. Anybody who believed in Jesus was being persecuted, was being killed, was being imprisoned, was being used as food for the lions and in the circus to entertain other people. And she felt really sad. So she started to pray, and she got into a very heartfelt prayer, and she started meditating about it. And while she was meditating, she felt a pilgrim coming to her. And again, this is the last chapter of this book. She felt a pilgrim coming to her, and she heard the voice that said, "My mother, I have come to keep you company and to receive your blessing." And he was dressed as a pilgrim, as a beggar. And Mary invited him in, like she did with all the pilgrims. So she invites him in, but something in her, like she felt she recognized the voice, and just hearing that voice did something to her, filled her with a hope that she didn't have when she was sad about all the persecutions. And the pilgrim continued talking and comforting her and giving her the words she used to give to the other pilgrims, talking about the kingdom of God and heaven and all the beatitudes, as bem-aventuranças. Blessed are the meek, blessed are those who suffer. And they were having this amazing conversation. And she was happy because she was like, well, this person truly understands my son's teachings. And she started getting more and more and more emotional, and she couldn't explain why. And then all of a sudden the pilgrim said, "My mother, come into my arms." And once he did this, and she looked at his hands or arms, historically there are debates that they didn't put the nails in the hand because you would fall down anyway, it was in the wrist. So these images are generated by Gemini. Gemini interpreted that it was in the arm. I left it alone. Because again, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
Right? But when Mary saw the wound, she was like, these are the wounds. And she looked at his feet, and she saw the wounds in the feet as well. She immediately reached for his chest to see where the spear had pierced him on the side close to the heart, and it was there too. And she was like, "You are my son." And at that moment, and he said, "Yes, it is I." And at that moment, she wasn't his mother. He was her master. And she tried to kneel down and kiss his feet as her master. He immediately lifted her, and he kneeled down at her feet. And he said, "Yes, it's me, and I have come for you because my Father wants you to be the queen of angels in my kingdom." And then the next day, she wasn't talking anymore. She was in bed, about to pass away. Some messengers went to grab John, brought him back. They prepared her according to the rituals of the time. And when she left her body, Jesus himself wasn't there, but she was welcomed by a huge group of angelic spirits that were singing praises to her. And then she knew she was going to see her son. But all of a sudden she thought, wait, I want to go back and see the beginnings. So she thought, all she had to do was think. She thought of Galilee. And there she was, just with her thought. She was overlooking Galilee. She was looking Lake Tiberias, she was looking Gennesareth, she was overlooking all of that. And then the group of spirits were like, okay, good, let's go now. And then she stopped, she was like, nope. What about all my son's children who are arrested and suffering and afraid, waiting to be taken to the circus and be massacred in front of everybody? So what does Mary do? She goes there. And she started praying with all of them, with each of them. But she wanted to do more. But she didn't know what to do. Like, what else could she do for them? And then she has an idea that we all know nowadays. But it was Mary who inspired this. She came to a young girl and she whispered in the girl's ear, "Sing, my daughter, sing." And the girl, of course, without knowing why or for what reason, because she was afraid, she was devastated, all of a sudden she got new energy and she started singing praises and she started thanking God for the opportunity to testify her faith to Jesus. And that's when the Christians started to get into the arena singing hymns. And that's why a lot of religions nowadays sing hymns or hymns de louvor, hymns of praise. It started with this idea Mary had. Because what she wanted to do in that last moment was give them joy. That what they were doing was not for nothing, was not in vain. And then, after that, she finally departed with her son. And then my question is, can we see Mary a little bit different now? Can we see the magnitude of this spirit? And right after she joins Jesus, her beloved son, Mary has the spirit to serve. So Jesus gives her a job. Since she is the mother that consoles all the people who suffer, if we think about us on earth, what mistake can we make that will cause us the most suffering in the spiritual world?
Suicide.
That's what she's in charge of. Jesus asked her to be in charge of the suicidal spirits, of the suicide spirits in the spiritual world. The book Memoirs of a Suicide, Memórias de um Suicida, explains very clearly how she protects them, how she helps them to get a new beginning, how she helps them to get a new start. But it's not just the suicide. Every spirit that suffers, we can always reach out to her. She is the mother of us all. And who is the first person that Jesus sends her to help? The most famous suicide in history? Judas. And he's very angry and he's very mad and he doesn't want to be helped because he thinks he deserves to suffer because he betrayed the Messiah. And with all the love, she tells him, don't worry, I will take care of you. You are going to overcome this. I'll give you a new mother. I'll give you a new beginning. And with her help, now we know he is again with Jesus and all the apostles. So, the final message I would like to leave is, first, motherhood does not have to be biological. After Jesus died and all the disciples scattered, Mary of Magdalene, who never had children of her own, adopted all the lepers, os leprosos, os mycelianos. And that's how she died. She got leper and she died in Mary's arm. She went to Mary and she died in Mary's arm. So motherhood doesn't have to be biological. You can adopt not just people, you can adopt a cause. And that maternal spirit that doesn't have to be only for women, because men also have the feminine in them, because the spirit has no gender. We can all use that maternal feeling, maternal instinct to embrace people, causes, right? Even if we did not receive the affection we would like from our own biological mothers, we still owe them a debt of gratitude for allowing us to be born in our physical bodies. Let us remember, even if our mother was not affectionate, even if our mother abandoned us, if it wasn't through her body, we wouldn't have been born. So we can still find reason to be grateful, because mothers are not born ready. Women who get pregnant and have children are a spirit that makes mistakes, like everybody does. And finally, those of us who feel a lack of maternal love, either because our mother wasn't affectionate, because we don't have a mother, because she has already passed away, we can all rest our heads on Mary's lap, because she has gladly accepted to be the most holy mother of all mothers. Thank you very much for this. Unbelievable.
I can do it, right?
Yeah, there's memoirs of a suicide here too, but by Ivone Pereira. Even though a lot of people say that, and it is, some parts of it, it's a heavy book and all that. It details how the Legion of the Servants of Mary work, and it's so consoling. There is no mistake that is unforgivable, and Mary is in charge of those who suffer the most. So we should never hesitate to reach out to her, because she is our most holy mother. All right, so let's do our final prayer. Yes.
Before the prayer, the
Yeah.
kids are going to bring something.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, because it's Mother's Day, of course. Oh, of course.
I love that image with the one.
Oh,
before.
yeah, Gemini, my friend.
That was beautiful. It's in Brazil right
It was a very long prompt.
Yeah, I know.
It's worth it.
She deserves
So hopefully we learned something we didn't know about Mary, and it helps us hold her a little more dear in our hearts.
I learned a lot, so thank you.
It's very powerful. Beautiful gift you gave us on Monday.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, because I had the opportunity to learn so much. I'll take it. Soninha reads minds.
Thank you.
Another one for you.
Mano, amor de dia pra mim. Amor de dia.
Quer que põe a música da luz?
Okay, so we're gonna play. It's a version of Ave Maria from Schubert, but it has lyrics in Portuguese from the name Paula Fernandes. Yes, from Paula Fernandes. It's a very touching song. I will please ask for forgiveness from my English-speaking friends, but I will pray the Hail Mary in Portuguese. You know the words in English and in Spanish, so
More poetic anyway.
thank you. Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco em seu coração. Bendita sois vós entre as mulheres. Bendito é o fruto do vosso ventre, nosso Mestre Jesus. Mãe Santíssima, Rainha do céu, nós pedimos que a Senhora nos ajude, todos nós, sofredores, aqui e além da vida. Que o Senhor esteja conosco nos momentos de dor e de necessidade e nos ajude a alcançar seu Filho.